Alright, well, it's new project time here. As you can see, the garage still isn't done, but I'm getting bored of drywall mud. So I'm going to try something I've been thinking about for a while. And so I got this stack of cedar here. This is it's about 3.5 inches wide. Hard to do this while holding the camera. A little over 3 inches wide. 15/16 cedar. They classify it as clear. Basically, that means there's not any knots in it. It's also planed smooth on both sides. It's actually meant for decking. As you can see, it has a little bit of a curvature to it. But what I'm using this for is to build one of these things. So this is a Wakesurf board. This is actually one of my favorite Wakesurf boards. I've got a number of them, but this one is about 6 or 7 years old. It's a 5'6" Ronix coal fish is what it's called. So the fish implies the tail part there. I don't know what coal stands for, but it's a nice riding board. One thing I like about it, it's got a fair bit of rocker in the nose, so you actually don't dig it into the wave all the time and end your session. So I'm going to try and build something similar to this out of this wood, and so I'll kind of give you a little insights along the way, and in the end we'll try it out and see how it works. That's all for now. Okay, so the first step is to try and actually get the shape into one of these boards, and so that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to get the shape on it. Unfortunately, this board has about the tip is about 3.5 inches up, so like that distance right there. And my boards aren't quite thick enough for that, so I actually have to I can't use the straight edge of the board, unfortunately. So right now I'm just trying to transcribe a shape onto that, and then it's going to be a matter of cutting all these exactly the same way, which isn't going to be fun, but that's the plan. I had thought about just cutting them thinner and bending them, but the problem is this is kiln dried wood. It doesn't bend, it just snaps. So short of a steam cabinet, I think this is probably the easier approach. Alright, so I've got the template created here out of a single piece. So you can kind of see what it looks like here. So if we set it this way, kind of get an appreciation for the rocker on the front. So I did actually leave it completely flat on the back half. So it was just a little easier to rip on the table saw. Because this part here is all completely, it's 1 1/8 inch thick. So I just rip that on the table saw. You can kind of see the scarring there of the saw blade, but I found that was a little bit easier. And then I formed the rest actually with a jigsaw, because my bandsaw had an incident and broke. So I'm going to work this down a little bit, sand it, get it right, because it'll be my template for drawing all the rest. Now, obviously, this thing is quite lightweight now. And I've got a few other weight-saving tricks up my sleeve here, if you're wondering how I'm planning on getting this thing to be at all surfable. There's just an idea of kind of what it might look like in the end as a couple boards all clamped together there. So that's where we are so far. Okay, so I've got my template all sanded down, smoothed up. Got the rocker on there. Nice size. Next step is going to be to rip down all these boards to take off the tapering. So as you can see, they've got a little bit of rounding on the corners. So we're going to take all that out, off each side. And then we're going to start to glue them. So I'll run through that here now. Alright, so nice straight edge for the first one, and I've set the saw now to trim off the other side. And there's the stack and all the leftovers. So basically all I've done is I've created a nice board from deck stock. You can actually buy it a lot nicer than this, but partly because I was going to be showing the inside of the grain here rather than the outside. The outside of the board, you can't really tell the inside's going to look nice, so buying boards that look nice for, you know, $3 a linear foot would be a little silly, since I'm going to cut them all up anyway. So these boards they're about 6 feet long and were about a little over $4 per board, as opposed to $3 per foot of board. So that's why I selected this stuff's not quite nice looking on the outside, but you know, once you kind of get a look at the inside, it looks just as nice as anything. Alright, so next, if I had a planer, I'd actually be planing these down. I don't have a planer, so I'm just going to run them over top of the bench sander here, just to smooth up the edges, so when we go to glue these together, you know, any little burrs and things aren't in the way. So here they are all set out. I kind of put the ones with a little bit of damages on the edges. But it gives you an idea of kind of what we're dealing with. Nice and true and straight and clean edges. You know, it's going to be an appreciation of what the finish of the board could look like. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to pair them and glue them. You'll see why in a bit while I'm only pairing them, but that will be the strategy here. I don't have enough clamps to do it all at once, so chances are this is going to take a couple days actually, and give you some updates as it goes. Now just a note, when it comes to glue, I had two options. One that I had on hand here is a polyurethane liquid glue, and then a Titebond wood glue. Now this one actually is waterproof. Now in the end this is all going to be lacquered, and the wood won't really get wet, but I've always been a fan of true wood glues. I've never really used the epoxy polyurethane type glues before, but I think I'm going to stick with the traditional wood glue just because it is such a porous wood. I just have confidence that that's going to work a little bit better, but you may be telling me I'm nuts right now and I can't hear it, so that's what I'm going to try. Alright, so I've clamped them in pairs. Glued them with the Titebond wood glue. I've got about half of them done here, and I've actually run out of clamps now, unfortunately. I'm starting to notice some of the boards aren't all exactly the same length, which I find a little surprising. I didn't cut any of them, but nonetheless, that's the way it is. So we'll clamp, we'll leave them overnight, then we'll do the next batch tomorrow, and then I'll rejoin you then. Alright, so I've got all the boards glued together in pairs, as you can see, and now I'm running them through the table saw to get a nice smooth finish on the bottom.
And because Jack.
Yeah, and my helper there. Just capture this here, buzzing these down. Okay, so here they are once they're all flattened out, and I've got the nice edge down.
And Jack.
And Jack's still here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut all the back sides so I can line them all up. So these are all pretty rough edges still. So I'm going to trim them all nice and true. So then I have two good sides to base everything else off of. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see you.
Hey, out of the way.
I see you.
Okay, now here we got them all laid out. So this is the bottom side up. So it's nice and smooth here. And I've clamped it, and you can see this end is nice and square now as well. So basically what I'm looking for now, is there anything that I need to cut away? So for instance right here I've got a knot. So this part's actually, when you actually look at the bottom of the board, this part's actually going to get cut away as the board curves up. And so I'm not going to have to worry about that knot, so that's why it's there. Over here I've got another issue. This part's right on the outside of the board, so I'm not going to have to worry about that. Another one that's a bit of an issue is I've got this right here. So this one will be exposed. So I think I'm going to have to relocate that pair of boards to the outside somewhere, just so it's not going to be a factor. So I'm going to start shuffling these things around, and then the next step is to actually start laying out the shape of the board so I can get an appreciation for what parts will be removed, what parts are going to stay, and then I can start shaping the individual pieces before I fasten them all together. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, new day, new challenge. So now I'm trying to actually shape for the XY dimensions of the board. And so what I did is I have a roll of, it's actually sort of building paper just attached to the table here. And I just rolled it out to the exact length of the board. And then what I did is folded it in half. So you can see the folds here, so that the two sides would be symmetrical. And then I just started kind of sketching and playing with it, and then cut out the shape. So this is the rough shape that I've got. Now I've changed it quite a bit from my original design, just from consulting with different people about kind of what kind of board will surf, and as opposed to kind of modeling a typical foam board, actually go with something more like a long board. So this is kind of what it looks out, and I'll lay it out here. And this is just draft one, by the way, so I'm not convinced that this is going to be what it is, but that gives you an idea of the shape. I'm not thrilled with it, actually, now that I open it up. Don't mind the nose too much, but the tail seems a little too wide, so more modifications necessary. So we'll do that. Alright, so here it is all traced out with both dimensions. So there you can kind of see the, I guess I'll call it the XY dimension, and kind of tapers towards the back here. Then you can also see the vertical Z dimension there, kind of what that's going to look like. So again, it's just a little over an inch thick. And so I basically have to trace that on each pair of boards and then cut them out. And then make sure they all fit together. Alright, so it's actually been 3 months since I did the last video, so I kind of broke things out here and did another trace on it. And I mapped out where the different boxes were, so I don't cut or drill any there. But just if you were wondering what I've been doing for 3 months, well, the shop's changed a little bit. So that's what I've been working on. But all of a sudden it's July and it's surfing season, so now it's time to get down to cutting these to the template. Alright, so I clamped the template onto the first pair and then traced it. So pretty simple. The key is to make sure the back side is completely flush here, as well as the back end is completely flush here as well. If I do that with every pair, I should get an identical copy each time. Alright, so now we're at the point where I can't screw up. So basically, the template is cut onto here. This would be the front, that would be the back. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it through the table saw halfway, so that way I guarantee that this 15 16ths, I think is what I said it was, is consistent, and then I have to stop at this point because that's where the curve starts. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that is what I'm going to do here. Alright, so now I'm just going to trim off the excess from each one. So I just set the height of the table saw to the exact height of the cut. Alright, so you can kind of get what I was doing here. Might make sense now. So this section here is the actual whole back end of the board. The middle of the board is around here somewhere. And then if you kind of look at the drawing, that's where it starts to taper up right there. So now the rest I'm going to have to cut individually using the bandsaw, which I've cobbled together again. And that should give the shape, and then I'll get an idea what kind of weight I'm dealing with. Alright, so next I get it set up here on my build-it-yourself bandsaw. Basically I got to just cut the line and the rocker for the front half of the board. A bunch of practice cuts didn't necessarily go all that well, so this is the first real one. So alright, follow along and you'll see how it goes. And here's the result. Just the template in the foreground and then the new pair in the background. So it's close. I mean, it's going to be a lot less shaping this way, but it's not perfect. But, you know, we're getting there. All right, a little past halfway done. It's tedious and requires a lot of concentration, but it's not turning out too bad. Have to trim the fronts off for that. But that's kind of what it's looking like. So it's getting there. The old born again bandsaw is doing an alright job, but better tools would definitely make this an easier project. So here's the finished product. I just put a single clamp on it just to kind of showcase it. It's pretty close actually, closer than I kind of thought it would be. These are my rudimentary tools. So the ends are going to be chopped off. In fact, of course, if you think about it, this will be rounded, right? So most of that won't even come into play. So I'm going to do a little bit more finishing up on the sander and then take another fitment check. So all the boards are shaped and sanded now, so they're all, you know, within about a 1/16 of each other. So now I'm trying to just lay out the XY of the board. I've really been tackling lots of different shapes, trying different things. This is probably the most challenging part of the whole thing because this determines whether the board's going to ride good or not. I've got these thruster fins that I got from Chaos surfboards, so you can look them up. Make some pretty nice Wakesurf boards and kind of been helping me out in this project. So the thruster, I think they're 4.5 inch fins, and trying to figure out where to put them has really been the challenge based on kind of, I can't find any resources for this type of board. So I ended up watching a video. I'll try and insert a link to it here. And it kind of gave me an appreciation of kind of how close the back fins are to the front fins and what angles and stuff to be at. So I can't hollow any of the boards until I get these in the right spot and make sure that part of the board stays full. So anyway, that's the layout. This is the shape that I've finally settled on, and so I'm going to just kind of mapping out where everything goes, and then we're going to start stripping weight. So before I pull this apart, you'll just notice I've mapped out where the fin boxes are going to go, so that's in red. Around the outside I've also put kind of some red scribbles, which is keep that area fully intact. And then I draw lines about every inch and a quarter, and so that's where I'm going to actually be drilling to remove weight. So it may not make sense now, but you'll kind of see in a minute how that's going to work. I've also marked a couple other spots here, these sort of red circle things, where I'm actually going to use doweling to kind of center it, so that's what's going to get all the pieces in the right spot. So see if this works. Alright, so I've laid out 4 dowels here. These are oak dowels, 5/8 inch. And I'm not sure this is necessary, but partly to when I want to put these together to line them up, and partly to have a little added strength throughout the board, I want to run these right through. So I'm going to set up a jig on the drill press, such that I can drill all these exactly in the same spot. Alright, so here we are at the drill press. So you can see the piece is in there sideways, and I line up the individual line where the dowel is going to go with the line on here, which I've pre-marked. I also have a vacuum set up there, very rudimentary, to capture the pieces here. So we'll see how this goes. First one, can't go back in there. Alright, well here's how it's going. The principle should make sense now, so the dowels are just going to keep it together, and I just literally stack them on one at a time. This piece here is the outside piece, it's going to have to be attached at the end. But yeah, basically that's kind of how this is working. The jig seems to be working well, the vacuum's working really well, and yeah, so just a few comments over here. So I elected to use a spade bit. I did try a Forstner bit, but it just doesn't evacuate that much sawdust, so what happens, it would get gummed up all the time and didn't really work. So I found this one works. It dances a little bit, which is sort of unfortunate, but other than that it's doing a good job. Not a lot of sawdust, as you can see. It's pretty clean in here, so it's all kind of going into the dust. Okay, so the board is together now. The ends kind of fall off, but I'll just pick up the middle section here just to yeah. A little flimsy yet, just because it tapers at the back and whatnot. So anyway, there it is. So it is starting to look like a surfboard. So really at this point the next step is to start lightening it. So now that I have it all fitted, I can actually go through and drill out, basically hollow out as much of it as I want with the drill, and and it should be strong. So this is what it looks like, kind of going back together with, you know, the Swiss cheese effect to lighten the board substantially. So some people use a planer. I thought use a drill press. Doesn't require much thinking. You just kind of set it up. Just kind of set it up with a nice jig. Just go to town. Turn on some music. And, so far I haven't screwed up yet, so the theory is seems to be sound. Go. Just keep going until we're done. Looks like there's 7 boards left. So I'm going to weigh one of the boards here before I turn it into Swiss cheese. So this one is 935 grams. I've been weighing other boards. The Cedar is so drastically different. Some are over a kilogram, some are under. So we'll just double check this one. So 935, we'll see what it is. All right, so here's the lightened one. You see the holes on one side, holes on the other side. They're offsetting. It's a pretty light, but let's see what the scale says. So 820, so it went from, I think it was 935 to 820. It's about 12-13%, I guess. Weight savings, don't know if that's significant, but let's see what this thing weighs. All right, well, it's all fastened together. It's got about 500,000 holes in it, but can't see any of them. So got them all kind of fitted together. It's fairly sturdy considering it's just got 4 dowels in it. Got some blisters from drilling that many holes in it, but that's about it. As you can see, I'd previously marked where the fin boxes go, so those don't have any Swiss cheese near them. Yeah, so now I'm going to actually glue it together and then clamp it and then let it sit overnight. Alright, now I'm gluing it together with my tight bond again here. Kind of brushing it in. A little too much glue on this coat. Key is getting it right up to the edges. And these start going in again now. Somewhere. Goes here. Back one goes back a little ways. Got to move quick here so I can get it done before any of the glue sets up. Alright, so go down there and just run in some of this glue here. And now it's time to clamp it. Let's get to the vapor. Come on, clamp. Alright, you're getting the idea. Alright, so here's the result without the clamps on. Just cut away a little bit of the glue, but there it is. Don't know what it weighs. It's not what I would call light, but it's not really heavy either. So next I'm just going to kind of clean it up a little bit, and then we're going to cut the top down shape, so the XY. Alright, it's time to cut out the ex-wire with the jigsaw. Once again, something you can't come back from. So, picked a nice sharp blade, my jigsaw. Basically, I'm going to cut it with oriented upright, I guess. I don't think it's really makes a difference. Just cut it, kind of make sure it stays vertical throughout. So, see how this goes. Alright. Ta-da! Alright, round two. Voila, surfboard. Alright, so this is the result. It looks a little bit like a surfboard. I didn't encounter any holes or doweling, so that means all my measurements were correct. That's going to be a little funky there, maybe. A little bit off there. So a little bit of planing is going to be needed. Not a lot. I think mostly we'll be able to do it with sanding, so that'll be next. Alright, good. It's set up here in the table vise. I'm going to do a little bit of planing on the edges first, and then move to the back and the front. Rails. Now I gotta try and take out some of these lumps. You can't really tell, but a couple of these didn't glue quite perfectly. Right here is bad. Right here is bad. So I'm just going to take these down just a little bit with this. Just careful working to make sure I don't go in where the holes were. So most of the planing is done now. It actually went pretty fast. Took out most of the major ridges. Now I just gotta basically sand down with the belt sander, get rid of all the markings, kind of smooth it out, and then go into a finer sanding. Alright, here we are after the planing and the coarse sanding. Starting to look pretty good. Haven't done the bottom yet, or touched up the edges. So that's where we're at. A little more sanding on the back side. Alright, new day, new eyes. Starting to find just a few little imperfections, especially in here where the belt sander made some divots, so Just using a random marble sander here to try and clean it out if I can. It's not too bad anymore. Alright, so next I'm going to do the rails. And a lot of research on this. Everyone has an opinion, of course, and me knowing absolutely nothing. Basically, this is kind of a cruiser board. It's nothing really performance. So I'm going to do the bottom with it's about a 1/4 inch round just on the router here, and we'll see how that looks. And if it looks good, we'll keep it going. So that's what the 1/4 inch rail looks like. It's kind of hard to get a good view of it. It's still pretty sharp. I'll think about this for a minute. For the top, I'm definitely going to give it a little bit more curl than that. I have sort of an increasing radius bit that I'm going to try. But the bottom, this I've installed a larger radius here for the bottom, so just to give it a little more. Pardon me, for the top. Sorry, this is the top. I guess they call that a blended rail. So we'll try it and see how it looks. I might end up using this one on both, but we'll just try it and see. Alright, so I got the rails done. I ended up going with a blended rail, so a little bit more on the top than on the bottom. It's kind of hard to tell, but that's what I ended up doing for no particular reason other than it seemed like a good idea. And now I'm just doing a little bit more finishing sanding with a 1/4 sheet sander. Just prep it for final finishing, I guess. Alright, next is one of the more challenging parts. I've laid the paper back on the bottom of the board just to mark out where the fin, we should call them boxes, go. So this is the area where I didn't hollow out the board. So if I did this right, there should be solid cedar underneath each of these spots. And so now I just got to do some measuring, get them in exactly the right spot. As you can kind of see, the lines there and the lines there where I want them. I just got to bring them out from the center line exactly the same amount and then mark them with the template provided. Alright, so a couple things about the fin. So the middle one goes straight up and down. The outer ones are actually flat on the inside, rounded on the outside like an aerofoil, and also slightly what I'm going to call cambered out. I'm sure surfboards have a different term, but so that's already kind of part of the fin. But also, you don't necessarily want them to go straight ahead. So the videos I've watched, and again, I'm not the expert, suggest tapering them in at about 1/8 of an inch. So I've kind of marked where that would be, and so you can kind of look, and it comes to the inside of the nose of the board. So you don't want it to cross at the front, you want it to be inside, so the middle being a fold in my old paper here, so you can kind of get an appreciation for that. So it's about 2 inches inside the front end. So that should help it turn a bit more, seeing as it is kind of a big wide board, I think this will probably help it. So I'm going to go with that 1/8. I have no idea if that's right, and use a Forstner bit to drill out the holes next. Alright, so all the spots are marked. I've checked them and they go to about 3 3/4 inches from the center line when they stretch down to the other end. Yeah, so next thing I want to do is just check the thickness of the board. So I measured that and it was a little under 9/8 of what I started with. But I want to make sure those are going to fit. So I used the vernier caliper just to verify the thickness of that versus the depth of a couple sample holes. So here's the sample piece where I drilled some test holes, and I have at least 3/8 of an inch to spare, so I won't drill right through the board. So planning works. Yay. Alright, so the fins are just sitting in there. They're cockeyed because they're not being held in by anything, but went pretty well. They seem to be aiming the right direction. I had a little oopsie on the one here. Started drilling in the wrong spot slightly, but I think that'll come out in the wash. So anyway, there's the thruster setup. And yeah, next it's going to be affixing the decals and then doing the first coat. So maybe I'll get that in this evening. Alright, so I printed out some just little logos and things on tissue paper, as well as the specs on the board and a little maple leaf to show the Canadian pride there. So basically you print it out on tissue paper and then set it right into the finish, whether it's a polyurethane or epoxy or a fiberglass resin, what have you. And the tissue paper basically goes clear, and I'll show you in a second. I did a sample last night. So that's what it looks like. You can kind of see the edges of the tissue paper on the side, but I think if you get it set in there just right, you probably won't really notice it that much. This was also a satin finish, and I'm doing a gloss, and this was also a 15-year-old finish I had sitting here, so that's kind of what it looks like when it's done. So we're going to hope for the best and start putting on the Varathane. So this is the product I selected. It's Varathane triple thick. It's actually what I used on these exact countertops. I think I used the indoor version for that. So this is the glossy outdoor, whereas this was the satin indoor. I was really happy with the finish. It's extremely durable. It's rock hard. Any little dribbles of it, you have to hit a hammer to knock it off. So I think this will be a nice finish. I contemplated fiberglass extensively and decided that the board with the dowel is just strong enough. It's not necessary, and I kind of want to surf this in the near term. So maybe this is a shortcut, but I think it'll look nice and I think it'll last just fine. And hey, if this thing surfs like a barn door, it'll end up on the wall anyway, and this stuff will look good. So that's what I'm going to go ahead with. Alright, so there's the first coat of Varathane applied. The stuff is pretty goopy. I'm not sure if I'm going to recommend it or not. We'll see what the result looks like. I ended up only getting the one piece of tissue paper in there. The other two tore when I put them in. So I can put them in on the next coat, but depending how much I like this, we'll see whether or not I do that or not. So after this dries, I'll flip it over and do the other side. Alright, so here we are. It's got about 3 coats a side of the triple thick Varathane. The finish looks quite... Whoops. Not all of my decals turned out. Some of them turned out okay. This one turned out okay. I don't know if it might have been the temporary glue that I used on the underside of those pieces of tissue paper, but I can't be sure. But the finish is pretty good. The triple thick Varathane, I wouldn't recommend it for really good intricate work, like if you're doing a nice antique or something, because it's a bit lumpy and a bit streaky. So, but otherwise it turned out really good. It's a shame I had these 2 knots in that piece that I never saw coming, despite my best efforts. So, second last step is attaching the fins with some epoxy, so I'm going to try tackling that here next. Alright, so when it comes to putting the fins in, I've sort of test fitted it, attached the fins permanently to here. Sit them in the holes with some epoxy, and then I'm going to get them vertical like that and let it set. I'm going to do the side ones separately. So the epoxy I'm using is Gorilla epoxy. Used this in the past with a lot of good luck. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be good in water, but it's not going to be submerged very much, so I think this will do. So I'm actually going to mix the epoxy right in the hole, just because I'm a radical that way. So rather than trying to get it in there after the fact, I'm not nearly coordinated enough for that. So let's just put some in there. Put a little more. And then here. There we go. Camera's sitting on my paper towels. So. I'm just gonna mix it up in there. And so it's probably going to seep a little bit. If I put in enough, it will. I might have to add some, but we will see. Pretty much the perfect amount there. Make sure those are even, where it should be. Perfect. All right, so we're on the lake. I'm gonna try surfing this thing, except I forgot a rather critical part. And that's the part that sticks to my feet. I forgot to put the traction pad on. I got kind of rushed. I also only got one of the fins on, so it should surf just fine with one fin, but if it surfs at all, that is. So we're gonna try it out here on the taiga and see how it works. By the way, the water is 64 degrees in July. Okay. Okay, so the shoes didn't really help, but the board was a little too slippery. But when I did get going, it worked pretty good. It was plenty fast, despite the fact the wave wasn't great today. So, I think it's promising. So,
Everybody needs to start talking. My wife is driving.
my wife is driving. She did a great job.
Yeah, you did.
She did a great job. No one died today, so good. Okay, thank you. That's all. All right, so back in the shop. Successful day surfing. Obviously forgot the traction pad. That created a big issue. Basically, the board surfed had a lot of push to go straight ahead. I think the thruster style setup will actually help it want to turn a bit. I found when I did try and turn, it really killed the board's momentum, and it was hard to get it back. Other than that, when you're going straight ahead, you had a hard time losing the wave. Like you could kind of ride the tail of the wave for a lot longer than I could with any other board. It rides so different than a foam board. It's hard to really describe. Usually with a foam board, your feet can kind of almost move the board around. But this thing, it's just going to do what it's going to do, and you have to use sort of all your momentum and weight to kind of move it where you want it to go. Nonetheless, I think it'll be pretty fun. In the end, like I said, it was around 16 pounds, which is about double the foam board I started with, so it's actually fairly light relatively. So I'm going to try some new things. As I learn more about it, I'll post more videos right here, so you can kind of take a look at them on how this thing surfs throughout the summer. So, if you watch the whole thing, leave a comment saying so. I appreciate it. And obviously this was, I think it's probably getting close to an hour now. The project itself took me spanning 3 different months, so and it's now middle of July. So I'm going to keep surfing this thing. Good luck. Let me know how it goes for you. I think I learned a lot and some things I might do differently next time. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask. Thanks a lot.